First up, this game even has first in its name, a game that aims solidly to hit the open-world looter-shooter feel of games like Borderlands, and even in some ways, The Division, and that's the first Descendant. A game that, surprisingly, from Nexon, actually looks pretty cool. A 4-player co-op shooter coming out on July 2nd. In the game, players take on the role of a descendant, tasked with defending humanity and safeguarding the Ingress continent from relentless invaders of some kind. Through battling bad guys, bugs, and bad guy big bosses, in various missions and unraveling captivating stories, supposedly, players are going to grow in power and uncover the deep-seated secrets of the Descendants and the characters themselves. Now, each of the characters in the game have particular skills specific to them, something we've seen in a lot of other games that you upgrade later. Nothing really new or strange there, with missions taking place across locations in a hub/open world kind of situation. One unique element to the game versus some of the others in the genre is that you play, and as you do so, you collect specific items that help you summon new Descendants, which are then the characters that you can play later on. As this, plus the heavy amount of items and weapon dropping, means that players who like the consistent revolving grind wheel of upgrade, more kind of gameplay style, this is going to probably suit them. In Descendants, each Descendant can have up to 3 primary guns, 4 secondary accessories, and a range of sub-weapons. Additionally, there are numerous items available to enhance your character's attributes, boost firearm stats, and grant entirely new abilities. This is one of those kind of games. Missions are doled out via various story elements plus special operations. Now, these are specific mission types like defending, which has you drop in and defend a local resource being attacked by enemies, each with a little bit of story delivered out. The game also has an operation called Colossus. This interests me. This is like mini boss battles, letting players go straight to the Colossus or the major boss battle without much rigmarole. But it's the world and how it comes together that usually matters to me and if I end up liking the title. Where a game like Destiny has bookended cutscenes into open-world killathons with little normal reactions or interactions with the world characters upon it, Division 2 has you engaging with NPCs, taking on jobs, and telling more of the fiction as you play. Keeping the player returning to the main city, taking on jobs, learning more about the world, then going out and taking on missions, as well as exploring the larger areas, and that story itself, as well as getting new Descendants, seems pretty interesting. Now, the minimum specifications for this on the PC are, of course, an i5-3570 or an AMD FX 8350. It's only requiring 8 gigabytes of RAM and a GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. That's your minimums. Now, I think we can all agree that most of the time, whenever a minimum or a recommended is set, the recommended is actually more along the minimum. So we'll talk about that for a second. The recommended spec is an Intel i7-7700K, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a GeForce RTX 260, or likewise an AMD RX 5600 XT. I think that fits more along the lines of what your minimum recommendations will be. Maybe it'll run even better than that, we'll just have to see. This is a title that I could see myself just dropping into to play because I do like these kind of shooters, especially as something that's on the side compared to reviewing or diving deep into some huge story-based title. Next up is Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. Now, Final Fantasy hasn't had a shortage of huge expansions, but something about Dawn Trail just seems way bigger to me, and especially as you investigate everything they're doing, it looks like it's going to be that for everybody. Not only will you have a huge new continent as well as cities to go to, it's got some major and massive graphical changes as well, something we've seen in trailers they've shown. Higher resolution textures, higher object counts, though that's only going to be in the first Dawn Trail content at first, and then going back and upgrading earlier content later on. That also will include new lighting, shadows, and huge increases in the foliage systems and draw distance. For a game this old, I think that's an awesome change, as well as shadows, lighting, and greenery will automatically all be added to new areas. Other additions include 2 classes, the Viper and the Pictomancer, which are up close and range DPS respectively. Also, they've got a level cap increase to 100, which for a lot of people who are out there, that's probably a huge bonus. There's a massive list of things they're adding though. New dungeons, new gear, new variant dungeons, new Alliance raid, new 8-player raid, new Ultimate raid, a new race of people living on the new continent, as well as some updates to the current classes, new plans for deep dungeons, as well as using 2 die pieces per gear. The Final Fantasy devs have released trailers as well as talks about these huge changes, and I think we're looking at something that for people new or old, it might be worth jumping into. But let's discuss again the minimum and recommended requirements. As I stated, usually you find the recommended is the minimum. We're going to go through that one right now. What we've got them asking for is Windows 10, of course, an Intel Core i7-9700 or higher, 16 gigabytes of RAM available, and a graphics card that's an RTX 2060 or higher, or, respectively, an RX 5600 XT from AMD. While this isn't the first MMO to see massive graphical improvements when it comes to some DLC arriving or expansion arriving, I do think from what I've seen, this is a title that already looks pretty good for an MMO that's this old, but to see these massive changes to it is actually sort of exciting, and I want to see what they end up delivering. I do like these MMOs, especially to just play and sit back with some of the patrons, so I'm excited for that. Next up, something completely different, Evil v. Evil, or basically Evil versus Evil. This is July 16th, 2024, and it's on the PC. Many vampires going around just shooting people. Now, you might think to yourself, that sounds a little bit like Redfall, especially a shooter with vampires, and I can see why you'd think that. But where Evil v. Evil is doing something different is trying to get the gameplay nailed down first. We saw a demo that recently proves overall they've hit that point. It adds in a little bit of a cyberpunk angle, and the idea of hopped-up undead, plasma-sucking, two-legged ticks running around with cyberpunk-styled guns speaks to me personally. It also helps that the game runs in an old Unreal Tournament 1999 kind of feel and speed. It is a fast game. I like that. It's a cyberpunk-styled vampire co-op shooter at its core, though, where you and two other vampires working for a mysterious sect known as the Order of the Dragon have to team up together to take down an even greater evil that's coming back. Now, each of the vampires has their own power, evil sin chains to pull enemies to you, undead power fireballs, and a shadow clone copy, respectively, with gun upgrades and power upgrades as well as you work through the levels. Attaching arcane jewelry to yourself like you're a huge fan of the old Vampire Lestat books will give you upgrades and bonuses. The game so far, and in the demo, it's more about just arena spaces with enemies being dropped in for various story reasons. But again, that's the demo. The reasons that I liked this overall, even though it's very low-level B-style game, is it's pretty generous with the speed and just sprinting around shooting people. I like those kind of games. Depending on if it can fully deliver, though, well, that's something else entirely. We're going to find out early July. But what I played in that demo is flaky fast, running and gunning with very little downtime. Locations suitably disguised like bad 1970s spy flicks as levels. Sure, there are some tunnels here and there and hallways, but most of this is built up just enough to get you to go through it at breakneck speed, and with as much violence as humanly possible. Feeding on the characters that you fight can also upgrade your power and give you more ability to use your specials. So far, speed's nailed. We'll have to see the rest. The required or recommended for this is Windows 10, an i7-9700K, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060. Having played this, I can say that the 3060 is probably even more powerful than you would expect for a game like this and the expectations. Speaking of expectations, this is a game that I don't really have any, but when I saw it, sort of interested me. Zenless Zone Zero, set to launch on July 4th as well, 2024. It's going to be on Windows, PlayStation, iOS, and Android. Zenless Zone Zero is the most recent game from Hoyoverse. And let's just forget for a second the acronym for this game basically means go to sleep. Whatever Zenless Zone Zero is trying to aim for, it's an all-new 3D action game from those same developers that takes place in the near future, and the world's been plagued by some mysterious disaster known as the Hollows, which suddenly manifest and create weird dimensions teeming with monsters called the Ethereal. While most of the world's ravaged, one city remains, and that's what you're going to adventure out of. Somehow it's found a way to keep going and coexist with the Hollows. It's a home to a large number of factions, people, and the players that all figured out how to make money off the tragedy. Of course, that means everyone's fighting with everyone else as well as whatever monsters are out there in the wild, and that's your gameplay as a base. As a professional proxy, a specialized guide, you help others navigate and explore the dangerous hollows themselves. You build a squad of up to 3 characters and you head forth to tame the world as just any video game really has you do it, beating the ever-living crap out of anything out there and then coming home and turning in their parts to upgrade. It's got a bit more of an open world or large open HUD style to it than I actually expected, but I think it fits with the other games nicely with their previous titles. Taking jobs, going out, performing those quests and bounties, collecting, and of course, the tried and true gotcha-style gameplay. They've nailed the aesthetic, that's for sure, and the more games they make, the closer these free-to-play but not free-to-play for long type of titles look better and better graphically. But the gameplay is still something that has never really captured me, regardless of the game that I've played from them. This one, I'm going to try out as well, just to see. While it doesn't seem to stray too far from the Genshin style of gameplay, a huge bonus for a lot of fans of that kind of game, and probably the death knell for those wanting to see if it offers something more unique than the past entries, hey, you might be able to jump into and just hack and slash for a little while. Nothing wrong with that. Now, here's another game I've done a preview for and is coming out soon, and that's Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn. This is from A44 Games, Kepler Interactive, and it's on PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series X. This comes out July 18th. They basically created the game Ashen. Art director Robert Bruce has described this game as an untapped subgenre of fantasy in its look, likening the setting and the tone to almost a Shadow and Bone kind of feel, Flintlock and fantasy. Siege of Dawn is an action role-playing game played from a third-person perspective where players embark on these quests to save humanity. Now, in the game, you assume the role of Nor, a member of a coalition fighting to prevent mankind's extinction by confronting ancient gods. You may have got to play this demo recently or watched my preview of it. I'd like to know what you guys think if you enjoyed that. Now, as Nor, players are going to engage in this combat that's a mix of up-close weapons and flintlock firearms. While those firearms are very powerful, their ammunition is pretty scarce, urging the player to use them judiciously. The game's combat system features a unique mechanic where as you attack or parry enemy strikes, you gradually fill the enemy's armor bar as well. Once this bar is completely filled, Nor can then deliver this blow that either instantly kills normal enemies or tears the shield out of the hands of armored ones, or significantly weakens bosses. But the unique element here I talked about a moment ago is the secondary weapon, and that's the flintlock. You can stun stop almost any enemy in the game in the midst of power moves with it, and it lets you get a moment to throw some strikes their way or rethink plans. The loop isn't unusual. We've seen this kind of thing before. Each time you fire the flintlock, it burns through gunpowder, which you can only get by normally attacking enemies. It's nice to see a game like this that doesn't hinge directly on purely Dark Souls feel, and they call this game Dark Souls Light for a reason. It's also not really contingent on consistent parry blocking or iframes, where a lot of games do that, which is a mix of hash and slash, almost at times like Devil May Cry. Throughout the journey, Nor is not only accompanied by other people that she can collect to her side, but also Enki. This is a mysterious fox-like creature that's another god I talked about in the preview. Enki provides crucial support by distracting or stunning enemies, teleporting Nor to safety, or enhancing her attacks. You can also do attacks that time perfectly with the button press of Enki's attacks, which I really did like in the preview, despite some roughness there. The game is divided into 3 massive regions, and there's a lot of reputation at stake. You go around, you save different locations from enemies, they open up, and you go in, have some coffee, and get some new rumors, as well as the ability to upgrade different items at any of those stores. Unlike a lot of games where you attack creatures and then you have to save the souls and then you have to sleep and spend those points that way, Nor doesn't really have that. Nor has a combo meter that really any attack you do ends up magnifying the damage of the next strike. You can turn those points in at any time, or you can continue to battle, and if you get hit, that multiplier goes away. Recruited NPCs contribute pretty significantly to Nor's journey here as well, offering not only different means of combat and attacks, just like Enki does, but also they can help you get through different locations and uncover secret areas. It's like Dark Souls in that way, with a lot of secrets and shortcuts. Now, A44 Games has described Flintlock as somewhere in the middle of a narrative-driven experience like God of War and something along the lines of Elden Ring. I would say it fits far closer to a God of War, at least in the idea of just consistent attacking and movement. They also describe the combo system as something that's actually a little close to Tony Hawk's scoring system. And after playing this, I would actually agree with that. That game's coming out soon. We'll just have to see how it hits. The recommended for this is an Intel Core i7-8700K or an AMD Ryzen 5 3600X, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and for graphics, a GTX 2060 Super. After my playing with this, I would say that seems to be pretty close, though at times I did have some graphical drops when I was playing the demo, but that's why it's a demo, not a completed game in the first place. But another title I was able to get hands on for the preview, if you guys get a chance to go check that out, comes out July 25th, and that's Frostpunk 2. You discover this city survival game set 30 years after the apocalyptic blizzard that ravaged Earth from the original game, transforming your world into this harsh, icy wasteland. In Frostpunk 2, you have to decide how to handle each deadly threat that appears on the horizon. Human nature against the requisites for keeping people warm enough so that they don't just turn into giant frozen turd burgers. Each day we get closer to this child slavery simulator known as Frostpunk 2, I'm happier. Never mind that you can put the youth to work in this game, Frostpunk embraces that cold style of post-apocalyptic city building by letting you straight up just decide to send all the old people packing onto the ice because, hey, once your workers get too old to work, your workers are too old to matter. A city building game that has you have to keep the lights on for the people, as well as keep them warm as possible. But just like a microwave Hot Pocket, almost all of the city has some spots where one location's scalding hot and the other's frozen. And it's your job to consistently balance work, life, and laws and logistics for this massive city. Do you overrun the generator at 150% to appease a group of people living on the frozen fringes of a cavern nearby, even though it's going to do damage later on that you're going to have to deal with? Or do you build more buildings out there hoping to heat up those in the middle using the unfortunate suckers who move there later as thermal human blankets? You're consistently battling embittered sons of bitches who are mad about something, religious groups, angry mob-style workers, and more you can invest in those different groups to push their priorities. But as you do so, you always have to be aware that at some point that can also go bad. And speaking of bad, at some point you have to listen to the actual people, the great sweaty hordes of know-it-alls that should be happy just being warm, but no matter what, they want life to be better. So now you have to deal with a human council, which is new for this game, and all of the things that a civilian council will deal with. And just like every single city council in the world, they consistently get in the way, and you have to balance just throwing them out into the thin iced lake surfaces or keep them around and do what they want. So far, the time with the previous build I had showed a great increase in flexibility from the major original game, something I had some issues with in Frostpunk 1, and something the devs have stated very clearly they wanted to improve here. As a city builder, as a civilization creator, and a post-apocalyptic simulator, Frostpunk 2 actually looks to improve pretty much on everything the original game had. This is saying that recommended is Windows 10 or 11, AMD Ryzen 7, or Intel Core i7, as well as 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a graphics card that's an AMD RX 5700 or an NVIDIA 2060 Super. My time with the game seems to fit pretty much that, though I did have a couple fits and stutters, especially as the city got larger. But again, another preview, so we're not quite sure where the efficiencies and the polish are going to be applied to this one. I really enjoyed my time with this during the preview. Again, if you get a chance, check that out. These kind of games for me in July offer this eclectic group. There's some MMOs, some service game style things, as well as a game that's a little bit like Division that makes me want to jump in. And then you have Frostpunk and you have Flintlock. And that's just a couple of the games that are coming out in July. What are the games that you're interested in? Leave a comment. Please subscribe. It absolutely helps the channel. Check out the podcast and check out the Patreon. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.